right now, starting right now, this presentation. And it will be available to watch on the Wigan Memorial Library's YouTube channel very soon, so you can stay tuned for that. One of our wonderful library trustees, Anna Makabali, is here, and she wanted to take just a moment to talk to everybody about some openings we have for library trustee. Anna, I'm just going to unmute you. There you are.
Hello. Okay, great. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Tricia. Good evening, everyone. My name again is Anna Makabali. I am a member of the Wigan Memorial Library's Board of Trustees. I have an announcement to make for Stratham residents. I would like you to know that we have 2 vacancies coming up in early 2024. 2 of the trustees' terms will be ending in March. A trustee's term is for 3 years, and there is a 10-day filing period in January. I would encourage all Stratham residents to consider running for the 2 open positions. We're actually looking for people who have the time and desire to fight for quality library services, people who have a strong, unshakable belief in the importance of libraries, and people who have the ability to be a team player and have a sense of humor, and also open to the needs of both the library and the community, and have the ability to voice these needs. The trustees meet at the library every 3rd Monday of the month at 6:30 in the evening. We're already done with our November meeting because of Thanksgiving, but our next meeting is on December 18th. You're welcome to attend the public session of our meetings, and the filing period for the 2 open positions is January 24th to February 2nd. Stratham Town elections is on March 12th. If you have any questions regarding the Wigan Memorial Library Board of Trustees and its 2 open positions, please contact me at ann@makabali.net. And I'll also leave my phone number and my email address later on. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you. Back to you, Tricia and Linda.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much.
Well, now I would like to introduce our speaker. I'm so excited to have Linda Ryden here, not just because she is my sister, although she is, but because of the wonderful work she has done over the years, bringing the benefits of mindfulness to children. Linda Ryden is the founder and creative director of Peace of Mind, Inc., the author of 6 books for children, which you can check out at the Wigan Memorial Library, and the former peace teacher at Lafayette Elementary School in Washington, D.C. Linda is a leading expert on teaching mindfulness, brain science, conflict resolution, and social justice to children, and we're so happy to have her here. Please welcome Linda Ryden.
Thank you. This is very nice. So I feel so honored to be invited to be part of your library program. I have a lot of admiration for librarians, especially my favorite librarian, Ryden. I never read a book unless she has approved it for me. Never steers me wrong. So thanks so much for coming tonight. I'm really excited to be here and to have the opportunity to talk to you about mindfulness for kids. It was a sort of an accidental discovery for me in my life that changed everything for me, and so I'm excited to share it with you. So I'm going to be talking about a little bit about what Peace of Mind is, which is the organization that I founded and that I run with my partner, Cheryl Dodwell. And I'm also going to be talking then about what mindfulness is and what mindfulness isn't, and also about brain science. And then we're going to talk about some of the books that I've written that we share through Peace of Mind. So I hope I will be able to do my slides properly. No, that's not good. There we go. I want to try to get rid of this. Can I get rid of that? So let me just tell you a little bit about peace of mind, our origin story, which is sort of my origin story as a peace teacher. I started teaching peace classes in about 20 years ago, a little bit after 9/11. And I really thought that there needed to be something at school for kids to learn about peace, to learn about getting along with other people, and to learn about kindness. And so I started a conflict resolution class at the school where my kids were students back when they were little. And I started teaching conflict resolution. And the class was very popular and kids really liked it and parents were happy about it. We had had a pretty big problem with fighting at our school up to that point. And so the school community was really looking for something. And I hoped that this would be the answer. But what I found kind of surprised me. It turned out that although kids really were interested in conflict resolution and in class, they could really intellectually grasp the concepts. It wasn't really changing things on the playground and in real life for the kids. I would often find that kids who had just been in my classroom learning about conflict resolution would go out to recess and get into fights. One time I was in my classroom and some kids got sent to me because they'd had a big fight at recess. And I said to them, like, why didn't you use the conflict resolution skills that you've been learning? And they just looked at me like I was crazy. They were like, Miss Ryden, we were so angry. We couldn't think and we couldn't remember anything you said. And I really was puzzled by this and frustrated because I had been working so hard and I really thought that what I was teaching was helpful, but something was clearly missing. And so I thought about it a lot and I realized that the thing that I wasn't teaching them was probably the most important thing, which was how to calm down. I mean, and even I knew back then that you can't work out a conflict when you're like enraged. And so I realized that I had to find a way to teach kids how to calm down. And so that was when I started to learn about mindfulness. And like I said, this was about 20 years ago. And so mindfulness wasn't like as common as it is now, and people weren't talking about it all the time. So it seemed like a pretty weird thing to do. But I thought, I already had a pretty weird job as the peace teacher at this school anyway, so I might as well just continue to do weird things. So I started teaching mindfulness. I learned about it over the summer. I read books, I took classes, and I just decided to dive in. And what I discovered was that the kids loved it. And they really took to the practices. They seemed to really enjoy doing them. And it was changing things in my classroom. But what we found out after a few months was that it was really starting to change our school culture. Kids just weren't getting into the kinds of conflicts that they had been getting into in the past. And when they were having conflicts, they were able to use the mindfulness skills that they were learning in peace class to calm down, and then they could use the conflict resolution skills. So it was really exciting to find out that that worked. And so when, as things started to progress and I started to teach more and more classes at the elementary school, people started to hear about what was happening at Lafayette. We got a little press, we got an article in the Washington Post. And so people started to come to visit Lafayette and ask me, if they could do what I was doing at Lafayette at their school. And I really wasn't sure how to answer that question because I didn't have anything I could give them. And that was when I was lucky enough to connect with my old friend, Cheryl Dodwell, and we decided to work together to write a curriculum. And when people started to use the curriculum and share the curriculum with other teachers, we decided to start a nonprofit organization to share the curriculum with people in the DC area, but now people all over the country are using the curriculum too. So last June, I retired from teaching and now work full-time with Cheryl at Peace of Mind. And the Peace of Mind program is now in schools all over DC, all over this area, and in schools all across the country. So it's something I never imagined would happen, and it's very, very exciting. So that's a little bit about Peace of Mind. Am I having trouble with things? Sorry. Oh, sorry, friends. I'm having trouble with my forwarding the slide. I don't know why. This, of course, didn't happen when we were practicing. Okay. So anyway, the vision of Peace of Mind is that all children grow into kind human beings who can build positive relationships, face challenges with courage and compassion, and make a positive difference in their communities. And that's what we work for every day. So I hope you can see. I don't know how to get rid of this bar here. Let's see if I can move this. So what I really want to talk about tonight is what mindfulness is and what mindfulness isn't. A lot of people have misconceptions about what mindfulness is. I certainly did before I started to learn about it and practice it myself. A lot of people, including me, thought that mindfulness really meant that you were going to just, sit down in the lotus position and clear your mind and just sort of sit in the blissed out way. And really, that really couldn't be further from the truth. Mindfulness is really all about paying attention. It's about being aware of the sounds and the sights and the feelings around you, of being aware of what's happening in your body, about what's happening in your heart, what's happening in your mind. It's really about noticing those thoughts, not getting rid of them, because that's not really possible. If you just rub your hands together and you just notice what it feels like to rub your hands together, just notice that you have hands. Notice that you're maybe making a little friction or a little heat between your hands. Just paying attention to that is mindfulness. We can be mindful of what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we smell. We can be mindful of the feelings of the people around us. Mindfulness is really awareness. And the difference between meditation and mindfulness, people ask me about that a lot. There are a lot of sort of loose definitions of these words, but what I usually think is that mindfulness is a quality. It's a kind of a way that you can live your life. You can live your life in a mindful way, really being aware of what's happening. And meditation is a practice. It's something that you can do to grow and enhance that quality. So we're going to look at a little video now. This is you're going to hear the voice of Dan Harris, who is you might recognize from, if you watch ABC News or Good Morning America. He was on those shows a lot, but he's really become a mindfulness teacher and somebody who's written a lot about mindfulness. Made a big difference to me. And so this is him talking about what mindfulness is. And Trisha, please let me know if this isn't working.
Despite what you may have heard, meditation does not involve joining a group, paying any fees, wearing any special outfits, sitting in a funny position, or believing in anything in particular. It is simple, secular, scientifically validated exercise for your brain. You don't have to do it yet, but just so you know, here are the 3 steps. 1, sit with your back straight and your eyes closed. 2, notice the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. Pick a spot where it's most prominent. Usually that's your nose or your chest or your belly, and just focus your full attention on the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. Now, as soon as you try to do this, your mind's going to go nuts. You're going to start thinking about, what am I going to have for lunch? Why did I say that dumb thing to my boss? Your brain's going to go nuts, and that's fine. The whole game is to notice when you've gotten lost and to start over, and then to start over again and again and again. Every time you do that, it's like a bicep curl for your brain, and it shows up on the brain scan. Scientists have found this in the lab. It's also, by the way, a radical act. You're breaking a lifetime's habit of walking around in a fog of projection and rumination, and you're actually focusing on what's happening right now. Meditation is unlike anything you do in the rest of your life. Failure is actually success. As I said, the whole game is just trying, failing, starting again, failing, starting again. Here's my advice. You should be meditating every day, 5 to 10 minutes a day. That's it. This doesn't require some giant investment. I don't care how busy you are. You have 5 to 10 minutes to give this a shot. I guarantee you it will make a big difference.
All right. So I love that video. So let's just try it. Sometimes it's easier to learn about mindfulness by experiencing it than it is to talk about it. At least that's certainly what I find when I'm working with kids. So gravity hands is, I would say, my students' favorite way of doing mindfulness. And what you do here is you're just gonna slowly lift your hands up with your palms up and then slowly lower them down. I know you can't really see me, and I call it gravity hands because if you're doing this slowly and mindfully, you're going to be noticing that gravity is sort of pulling your hands down, especially when you turn them over at the top. If you leave them there for a moment, you can feel that your hands are starting to feel heavy. They're not actually getting heavier, of course. It's just the gravity is pulling them down. And so making that really slow, deliberate, controlled movement is a great way to combine with breathing so that you're breathing in kind of a slow, controlled way. So we're just going to breathe in when we move our hands up and breathe out when we move our hands down. You can breathe any way you want to. I usually breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth for these things. And if you want to, you can close your eyes, but you totally don't have to. Let's just try 3 gravity hands breaths together. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. That's a basic breathing practice that we do a lot in peace class that can really help you to calm down. So a lot of the times when people think about mindfulness or meditation, they sort of think about it in terms of self-care and in terms of like helping to calm you down. You might think of like being at a spa or retreat or something. And it is that, but that's really not all it is. It's much more powerful than that. And it's really the self-care benefits are very important, but it is also really important for the well-being of other people. It's one of these wonderful mutual things. When we take care of ourselves, when we can calm ourselves down when we're feeling angry and not react to a situation without thinking, that's helping others. When we focus on our words before we speak, that's helping others. And so it's a very important practice in terms of peace, which is, the goal of my program in the first place, to making the world a better place. Mindfulness, becoming a more mindful person, you're doing a really big favor for everybody around you. There are 3 areas that we focus on with mindfulness. We teach breathing practices like the one that I just showed you that can help you with regulating your emotions. We teach metacognition practices, and metacognition just means like thinking about thinking, noticing your thoughts. And those kinds of practices can be really helpful in a lot of ways, including helping with focus and awareness of your thoughts, of your words, of your feelings. And then we teach connection, compassion, and gratitude practices. And the card that's up on the slide here, heartfulness, is a compassion practice that we do a lot in peace class. And the way you do this is you think about somebody and you take a moment, close your eyes maybe, and you just think these thoughts about them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be peaceful. And then you can think those thoughts for yourself, which can sometimes be challenging for some people. You think those thoughts about people you love and you know well. You can think those thoughts about people that you don't love and you don't know well. You can think those thoughts about the whole world. And there's actually research showing that people who do compassion practices like this really do start to treat people differently, and it does make them kinder. And so I think it's a really important thing. It's a big part of trying to make the world a better place. So mindfulness has a lot of benefits, and some of them I've talked about already, and some of them are more familiar. One benefit that was very surprising to me, but very powerful, was the metacognition benefit. I don't even think I knew what that word meant when I started learning about mindfulness. But I had always really been plagued with worry, and as a child I was constantly worried, and as an adult, especially when my kids were little, I was just worried all the time. And through my mindfulness practice, I started to pay attention to my thoughts, and I just noticed that I was worried all the time. And I started to really question like whether those worry thoughts were productive in any way. And I started to think about it like I had a little TV in my brain, and I was always on the worry channel. And so I learned that if I could notice that I was on the worry channel, then I had an opportunity to change the channel and to think about something else. And so I do that all the time. I'm constantly saying, up, worry channel, and I make myself think about something else. It takes practice, but it has changed my life dramatically. The metacognition practices can also help you sort of deal with that inner critic, that voice that a lot of us have inside that might, be saying like, "Ugh, you're doing a terrible job on this presentation, Linda." And I can hear that voice and I can say, "No, it's okay. I'm okay. It's all right." I can hear that voice and I can question it. I can try to talk to myself in a different way. And, as we know, when people are kinder to themselves, they're kinder to other people. So again, this is a way that I can help others while I'm helping myself. Metacognition also can help us to see our beliefs more clearly. You can start to examine the things that you believe to be true and your opinions, and start to really question, like, is this how I really feel about somebody or something? And are these my thoughts? Are these the culture's thoughts? Are these my family's thoughts? And then think like, what are my thoughts? And then you can be truer to yourself. And again, it's another way of taking care of others. I'm not going to really go into the research. It's not really my thing, but there is a lot of research about the benefits of mindfulness, and for kids and for adults. And if you're interested in that, you could look into that. Here's an example. Let's learn another breathing practice. This is another one that my students really like. I've found that for the most part, the things that I teach in this class for elementary school students are really helpful to everyone. So I use these practices. I see other adults using these practices. And so if you have children in your life that you want to share these practices with, that's great. If you don't, I encourage you to take them on as your own, because they can really be helpful. Take 5 breathing is very simple. You just trace your hand. I don't know if you can see my hand, but you trace your hand, and as you're tracing, you're going to breathe in and out deeply. So you could breathe in as you trace up and breathe out as you trace down. In and out. And you'll just go and trace your whole hand. I see kids using Take 5 breathing all the time. At school, kids, they're taking a test, their hand is under the desk and they're doing their Take 5 breathing. Maybe they're getting ready for their piano recital, they're doing their Take 5 breathing, or at a baseball game, doing their Take 5 breathing. It's one that kids really respond to and use. So if you have an opportunity to share that with any kids in your life, that would be great. So you might be sold on mindfulness by this point, I hope so, but you really might be wondering, well, it all sounds great, Linda, but how would I get my kids to do it? And I hear this a lot from parents who've tried to introduce mindfulness into their home life, and even kids who are perfectly happy to do mindfulness in my classroom won't even consider doing it at home. And we all know that kids really don't generally like to do things that their parents want them to do and think is good for them. So we have to find ways to work around that. And I would say my 2 main suggestions are to model it and to make it relevant to kids. When I say model it, I don't really mean that you have to have a full-blown meditation practice of your own before you could introduce mindfulness to your kids. Your kids don't have to see you sitting on a cushion doing, meditating for half an hour. What I mean is that if your kids were to see you taking a moment when you were getting angry and doing some Take 5 breathing, that would be powerful. In my classroom, whenever I would get sort of angry or frustrated, which happens a lot when you're teaching, I would always just stop class and I would say, kids, I need to take a moment. I'm going to take some deep breaths because I'm starting to feel that I'm getting angry. And I might describe, the physical sensations I'm having that tell me that I'm getting angry. And then I would just sit in front of the class and I would take some deep breaths, Take 5 or gravity hands or something. And no matter what had been going on until that point, you could hear a pin drop when I was taking my deep breaths, because the kids were really fascinated to see an adult managing their emotions. And it's important to remember that I was not pretending that I wasn't angry, and I wasn't pretending that I was making that anger go away. What I was modeling is noticing that I was starting to feel angry, taking some deep breaths to help me calm down. And then I would say, okay, let me tell you why I was feeling frustrated. Or I might ask them, why do you think I was getting so frustrated? And somebody might say, oh, we weren't listening or whatever. And then we could talk about it. Kids would always say, oh, Miss Ryden, you're the peace teacher. You never get mad. And I was always like, oh, no, I get mad all the time. I'm mad right now. But because of my mindfulness practice, I'm not taking it out on you. It doesn't mean I'm not going to tell you when I'm mad, but I'm not going to be yelling. And that's the difference. And they really appreciated that. So I think if parents, grandparents, any grown-ups who are in kids' lives can model that kind of that self-regulation and be honest about emotions, I think it would make a really big difference. And I noticed that kids were much more likely to do mindfulness when I showed how it works for me. Another way you could make it relevant is to talk about famous people who have meditation practices or mindfulness practices. I don't know anything about sports, but when I Google it, it shows that there are lots of sports figures who do use mindfulness practices regularly. That's LeBron James, a famous basketball player. He's really kind of famous for sitting on the bench during a really important game and closing his eyes and breathing, and people think it's very odd, but I mean, it's obviously working. I've got, there's Steph Curry, who's another basketball player who uses mindfulness. And then I have, just because I think my dad is here, I have two of my dad's favorite athletes, Derek Jeter and Sue Bird, who also use mindfulness regularly in their practice. So there's also celebrities. You might know who some of these celebrities are. They're probably younger ones that kids would know more about, but a lot of celebrities make it public that they use mindfulness practices to help them. So you could share that with your kids. But I think that the sort of most important way of making mindfulness relevant is to teach kids the brain science behind it and why it works. And so that's what we're going to talk about now. If I can move the slide, yes. So after I started to teach mindfulness, as I said, the practices really started to work for my students, and we started to see a big change in our culture at our school. And so at that point, I really started to wonder, like, why does it work? Like, what's happening that makes taking these deep breaths, why does that affect the kids' behavior? And so I started to read about brain science. And there's a wonderful writer named Daniel Siegel, who's written several books about children's brain development, and I was really fascinated by what I learned, and I decided to start teaching my students just a little bit of brain science that was really relevant to what we were talking about. And I liked it so much, I wrote a book about it. So the first book that I ever wrote is called Rosie's Brain. And it tells the story of a little girl named Rosie who was excited about playing soccer with her friend Henry on a Saturday morning until her mom tells her that she has to go to piano lessons instead. She gets really angry. She yells at her mom. She throws her bagel on the floor, stomps up to her room, slams the door. And when she gets into her room, she meets three people. And those three people represent three different parts of her brain. They explain what the different parts do in her brain. They explain to her how mindful breathing can help. And then she's able to solve her problem. So those three parts of the brain that Rosie learns about in Rosie's Brain are the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, and the amygdala. And really quickly, the prefrontal cortex is the big part of your brain that's kind of behind your forehead. That is the boss of your brain. It's the part that does all the thinking. It organizes all the different parts of your brain to do different things. And it's the part of your brain that's usually in charge. And it's also the part of your brain that develops very slowly as you mature. So it doesn't fully develop until you're about 25 years old. So, if you ever wonder like why your kids are acting the way they're acting, and you think like, what are they thinking? They're literally not thinking as much as adults are, and it's because their prefrontal cortex is still pretty immature. So the prefrontal cortex, extremely important. Wear your helmets. The hippocampus are these two blue parts here. They look sort of like pickles, which is why I call them I call the hippocampus Miss Pickles in my book Rosie's Brain, and it's also what I call my sister Trisha. The hippocampus is the part of your brain that makes and stores all of your memories. And I always think of that as kind of like a library filled with all the books of everything that ever happened to you. And then lastly, we have the amygdala, and that's those two little red dots. I'm referring to them as one thing. They're sort of two, the amygdala and the hippocampus are sort of split in two in the two hemispheres of your brain, but they're generally referred to as kind of one thing. The amygdala is one of the most important parts of your brain, and also one of the most troublesome parts of your brain. And it's basically the security guard of your brain. It's the part of your brain that is constantly watching out for danger. And then if it senses any kind of threat, it takes over and it kind of overrides the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus and goes into what we call fight, flight, or freeze mode. So when kids learn about their amygdalas, they're always like, oh, that's why I did that dumb thing, or that's why I screamed at my sister, or that's why I punched my brother. And one of my students said, my amygdala is an idiot. Sometimes, but sometimes our amygdala can be life-saving. Your amygdala protects you, like I said, through fight, flight, or freeze. So if it senses a threat, you're either going to fight it or fight it off, run away, or just kind of freeze and hope that it doesn't see you. This is great. If you're actually in danger, if you're being, chased by a bear, you definitely want your amygdala to get you out of there quickly. It sends these hormones through your body, like adrenaline, that can help you to run really fast or to feel strong. Those are super important life-saving things. The downside is that sometimes your amygdala can't tell the difference between actual danger and something that you just don't like. So if you're a kid and you're at a birthday party and you wanted a chocolate cupcake and you got a vanilla cupcake and that was the last cupcake, you're not in danger. But your amygdala might notice that you're upset about it and think, oh no, the cupcake, we're in danger. And it might take the cupcake and throw it on the floor, or yell, or have you run out of the party and, and have a tantrum. Not great. Your amygdala can also respond with fear, and you can overreact to a situation, like giving a presentation on Zoom or playing piano in a piano recital. You're not in danger, but it can sure feel like it sometimes. And so you might panic, you might freeze up and you can't remember the piano piece, or you can't remember what you were going to talk about. Those are all things that happen because of your amygdala. So your amygdala affects your interactions with other people, and deep breathing, the kind of breathing practices that we do in mindfulness, can really help with that. When you take a deep breath, you're sending a message to your amygdala that you're not in danger. Because really the way we breathe when we're in danger is fast and shallow. So if we deliberately kind of force our body to breathe deeply, our amygdala senses that and realizes like, oh, I guess I'm not in danger. I can step down. And then your prefrontal cortex can take over again, and you can figure out what you need to do to solve the problem or deal with whatever happened. So in this situation, we have a stimulus, somebody wants to take the ball away from you. Your amygdala might make you react by just grabbing the ball and making the other kid cry. Or you could respond in a different way. You could respond by taking a deep breath. Somebody tries to take the ball away, you take some deep breaths, and then you can think like, oh, we could take turns with the ball, right? It's another option that isn't available to you when your amygdala has sort of hijacked your brain. So there's so many different ways that you can take care of your amygdala. Fireworks breath is another breath that we do in peace class. This one of my students made up, second grader, and we all really loved it, so we do it all the time. The way you do fireworks breath is you start with your hands, kind of make your hands into little balls in your lap, and when you breathe in, you lift your hands up, lift your arms up, and when you breathe out, you just sort of open up your hands and imagine beautiful, sparkly fireworks above your head. This is a really lovely way of calming down when you're angry. And I'm going to share a little video of some of the kids in my class doing fireworks breath. Most of the time in peace class, the mindfulness practice is led by one of the students. And this is a little boy named Jakob he had just recently moved to the States from Denmark and hadn't been speaking English for very long, but he was so excited about mindfulness that he wanted to be the mindfulness helper and was willing to sort of try out his English in front of the class, which was, I thought, really wonderful. So hopefully this will work.
Look into a map of bodies. Close your eyes and look down. And let's take 5 deep breaths. Breathe in. Out. In. Out. In. Out. In. Out. In. Out. Now let's take one last stretching breath. Breathe in and out.
Sorry. I can do it. So kids love mindfulness, and it can be challenging sometimes to introduce them to it, but if you can, it can be really helpful. And they really take these practices into their lives, and they tell me all the time that, this is a parent took this picture of some kids who were in their championship little league game, and they sat on the bench and they did their deep breathing, so they were going to be ready, and they won. So because this is a library presentation, I thought I would talk about some of the books that I've written that are all about mindfulness in one way or another. There are 6 books so far. Rosie's Brain has also been translated into Spanish, and I have another book that's coming out in January. Marley is Mindful is a book of a bunch of different mindfulness practices that can help kids to learn about things like Take 5 breathing and fireworks breath and gravity hands. And each page is a different little vignette of a kid talking about a problem that they have, like they can't sleep, or they're angry with their sister, and they talk about how different mindfulness practices can help them in their everyday lives. We're actually right now raising money to translate Marley is Mindful into Spanish, and we're hoping that we'll be able to do that pretty soon. And one other thing I wanted to mention about all of the books is that when I started writing children's books, I discovered that there were very few books about children of color. And if there were books about children of color, they were almost always historical books about the period of the Civil War, the period of the Civil Rights Movement. And so I really made a point of making books that were about children of color, just doing regular kid things. And so all of the books that I've written are named after real kids that I know. They're not those children's stories. They're my stories that I made up, but they're named after kids. So this little girl in the picture is the actual Marley. Sergio Sees the Good is another one of my books, and this talks about another aspect of brain science that I learned from Daniel Siegel and another wonderful writer named Rick Hansen. And it's about the negativity bias in the brain. And this means that our brains are much more likely to remember and kind of hold on to negative things than positive things. And this is probably something that you have experienced yourself. Like for me, like if I finish this presentation and there are, 11 comments in the chat and 10 of them are, thanks so much. And one of them says, this was boring. Which one do you think I'm going to remember? Right? I'm going to focus on that one person who said it was boring, and I'll be thinking about it and remembering it for a long time. I'm not going to keep special places in my in my hippocampus, my memory bank, for the 10 other people who said thank you, right? Our brains do that again because it's trying to protect us. It wants us to remember things that might be dangerous so that we don't do them again. So if I touch a cactus and it hurts me, I'm going to remember that. So the next time I see cactus, I'm not going to hurt myself again. That's useful. Not really useful to remember one comment out of many. So Sergio Sees the Good is a story that talks about that concept and teaches a way that we can try to find all the little good things in life and really sort of train our brains to focus on those little good things to sort of overcome the negativity bias. And that is a picture of the real Sergio. Henry is Kind is another one of my books. It's a story about a little boy who thinks that he's not kind, and but it turns out that his friends start giving all these examples of kind things that he did, and it really changes the way he sees himself. And in that book, we teach the heartfulness practice that I talked about earlier. And I don't have a picture. It's embarrassing that I don't have a picture of Henry because Henry is my son. This is Quinn, and the Worry Channel is another one of our books. It's about the metacognition concept that I was talking about earlier. That's Quinn there. And Quinn is, this is really about what I was talking about earlier about worrying, and it's also about something that a lot of kids struggle with, and grown-ups, not being able to sleep. And so in this story, Quinn is struggling to fall asleep because he can't stop his mind from worrying. And so his little bunny friend, Fred, teaches him about mindfulness and about metacognition so that he can learn how to change the channel and to think about something else so he can fall asleep. Tayeja uses the Think Test. This is a book about mindful communication, and it teaches kids a way of sort of stopping and taking a breath and thinking before they say something. Tayeja wants to tell her friend Rosie that she hates her new haircut. And the Think Test, or these little fairies back there, they represent true, helpful, necessary, and kind. And they encourage Tayeja to think about whether telling her friend Rosie that her haircut is terrible is true, helpful, necessary, or kind. And so it's a way to help kids grapple with ethical questions. And it doesn't tell kids what the answer is, but encourages them to think things over before they speak. And that, of course, is a picture of Tayeja. My newest book coming out is called Mason and the Conflict Cat. And this is a book that teaches the conflict resolution method that I teach in Peace class, that is built on the foundation of learning and understanding mindfulness and brain science. Once kids understand those things, they can start to understand how conflicts escalate. And then they can use their breathing practices to calm down. They can apologize for whatever role they had in escalating the conflict. And then we teach them some tools that they can use to try to work out the conflict. So this will hopefully be out in January. We also, just a couple of things I wanted to tell you real quick. We have a new podcast for kids and for families. It's available on Spotify, and it's called Palmcast. And in it, I'll be talking about a lot of these things and sharing mindfulness practices, reading some of my storybooks. And I hope that you will listen and share that with kids in your life. We also have a YouTube channel. It's called Palm TV Kids. And on the YouTube channel, there's just lots and lots of videos, like the one that we saw earlier of the kids doing fireworks breaths. There's lots of videos of me and my students teaching different mindfulness practices. And it I think would be a really fun place for kids to go. So that is all I wanted to tell you. These are ways that you can reach peace of mind and follow peace of mind and learn more about peace of mind. And I think Cheryl's going to put those in the chat for us if you want to get those links. And at this point, I would love to answer any questions you might have. I haven't seen the chat yet, so I will take a look at that. And
Linda, there were Cheryl has put the links in, which is awesome. Tom Jarvella, one of our library patrons, was asking about suggestions you might have for adults to learn more about child brain development. And Cheryl had put in a link to Dr. Daniel Siegel, who you had mentioned before. And there was another author, Rick, somebody that you had mentioned,
Rick Hansen. Yeah.
Okay.
He's a fantastic psychologist, and he's a mindfulness teacher, and he had I think those would be my two go-to places to learn more about the brain. And Daniel Siegel, I forgot, he was writing with another woman and they wrote a couple of different books about children's brains and teenager brains. Very interesting. We might have links to those on our website. I can't remember, Cheryl, if that's true.
And Tom, if we don't have any of those books, we're happy to try to borrow them from another library for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something I wanted to point out is these little drawings, the little people that you see with the little lemon-shaped heads are all Linda's drawings. She's drawn little people like that her whole life, and they're great. And most of the books that she's written, there are a couple that were illustrated by somebody else, but most of them are illustrated by Linda.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I used to draw a lot when I was a kid, but then I hadn't drawn for years. And when I wrote Rosie's Brain back in 2016, 14, I was trying to find an illustrator, but we didn't have any money. So I kept thinking, what am I going to do? And nobody would do it for free. And my dad actually said, why don't you do it? And he said, you used to draw all the time. And so I thought, so I started drawing these little people that I used to draw when I was a kid. And that sort of became my style. So I'm going to stop my screen share. Trish, is that?
Sure. Linda, there's a question asking if you'll share a bit of perspective about why mindfulness feels perhaps more important now for our youth community, thinking about the pandemic time and the world in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been important, and I think every kid needs it. And we used to say, before the pandemic, that mindfulness is so important for kids, especially those who've experienced trauma. And since the pandemic, we really know that all kids experienced trauma during that time, and to varying degrees. But I think that having these practices to go to, having an opportunity to really pay attention to what you're feeling and name those feelings. I think it might be Daniel Siegel who says, you kind of can name it to tame it. And so sometimes feelings can be very scary and overwhelming to kids. But when they can name it and say oh, that's fear, or that's anger, or that's anxiety, or that's worry, those feelings become a little less terrifying and confusing. And having some skills that you can pull out to try to help you to manage those feelings is really liberating. And I think I really can't overstate how important it is to understand the brain science. I've just seen that have a really profound effect on kids. Often kids who had real behavior challenges and real temper challenges. And I think for the most part, kids are taught that anger and having a bad temper is a character flaw, that there's something wrong with them. Whereas oftentimes the kids that I've seen who are dealing with stuff like that have a really good reason to be angry, or it's just the way their brain is wired and it's not their fault. And so helping them to understand what the amygdala is trying to do, and that the amygdala is trying to help you, but that you can sort of help the amygdala help you, is really liberating. And I've seen it really change kids, and change the way they see themselves, and then sort of change the way people see them, and their behavior. And so it can really be life-changing. And I think right now, I just can't imagine anybody who wouldn't need these skills right now to get through the world that we're living in right now. And kids are super aware of what's happening around us. Gone are the days like when we were kids, when you could be sort of blissfully ignorant of what's happening in the world.
Just a few comments. Martin said, great presentation, thanks. Tom said, I have to sign off to go read to my kids for bedtime. Thank you so much, Linda. This was a wonderful presentation. Lily said, thank you, Linda. I loved your clear explanations on mindfulness and the brain. So that is a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much, Linda, for doing this. That's great. And thank you all for joining us. And again, we'll be posting the video of this presentation on our library, Wayne Memorial Library YouTube page. So you can look for that. Oh, and there's a comment from Anna, amazing curriculum. All right. Thank you all for joining us, and good night.
Thank you, Tricia. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.